AITA for telling a guy's new girl that he's polyam by you, the other zebra. I, a 28-year-old female, went out on a few dates with a guy, a 27-year-old male, last month. Then, one day, when we were hanging out, he starts flirting with some other girl. I pulled him aside and told him that while we weren't an official couple, I was uncomfortable with him flirting with other girls in front of me. After, he revealed he's poly. I have no problem with polyamorous people, but that's not me. If he told me that before, I wouldn't have dated him. I put an end to it there, and we've barely spoken since, though I've run into him at some social events. We frequent the same bars. 3 days ago, I saw him being really touchy with another girl. When I saw her heading for the ladies' room, I followed her. I asked if she knew he's poly, and she said no. Apparently, that was not her type of relationship either, and she ended whatever was going on with them. Now, he's furious. He says I had no right to go behind his back, that it's none of my business. He was going to tell her when the time was right and that he learned from his experience with me. I don't believe him because she clearly had no idea, though I have no idea how long he'd been seeing her. He's claiming that I'm jealous and petty and just trying to get him back. I think she had the right to know. I'm definitely not trying to get him back. I feel used by him, TBH. Am I the asshole?
So there are definitely people that will use poly. They'll just take that as a thing and be like, yeah, I'm poly. And then they're just using that as a label to be a dickhead, right? Like that's that. And there's definitely a possibility that this guy is one of those guys.
Is this against poly best practices, Max?
Let's get it out right up front that I am not an authority. I am just a...
Well, you're a participant.
Yeah,
Don't, I'll tell people how monogamous culture works. You pine for other women and your girlfriend gets mad. That's how it works.
That's how it works.
You don't need a disclaim here. You have your experience. That's it.
I will say that there is this kind of weird entitlement or like narrow-mindedness when it comes to like people dating other poly people or that sort of thing, where you go, okay, so she went into they went on a couple dates.
Yes.
She at some point decided that was heading to a monogamous commitment without communicating that at all.
Gonna fight you on that.
Okay.
Did she decide that, or is that a very common assumption?
It's a very common assumption.
It's the default mode.
And that's a problem.
Is that a problem?
Of course, because there are lots of different ways to date, and there are lots of different ways to be poly, and there are lots of different ways to, I think, be monogamous too. And people look for different things in their relationships. And I think when you go on a date with somebody or when you are meeting them, the default assumption that they want exactly what you want without communicating on that point, which is something both parties here are guilty of. Neither of them came forward and said like, hey, this is what I am looking for. I think there is a kind of equal distribution of responsibility there.
I'm going to fight you on that. Look, there's a lot of different lifestyles involving drug use, right? You could be a non-drug user, a pot user, a crack user. I think if you use crack, you got an obligation to disclose. Doesn't necessarily mean you have a crack problem. Maybe you just do crack.
So you're equivocating being polyamorous with smoking crack?
Well, I'm saying there's different lifestyles. Some of them are unconventional and some are not. I used to know someone who did meth casually. They would do meth once a month. No problem. If you want to do that with your life, but do I think that's a little bit different than someone who smokes pot on the weekends? Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think what poly people or not any non-monogamous type of person is interested in is actually normalizing that and making it part of, because there are a lot of people who are openly polyamorous and non-monogamous and that sort of thing. And then there are lots of people who are monogamous and that sort of thing that would be much happier doing this. You see it all the time. If you're the kind of person who are like, your relationship's always like the sexuality of your relationship dies out. You always end up emotionally or physically cheating, that sort of thing. Like, and you just keep getting in these monogamous commitments that break, like people seeing it as this weird thing that's not an option, and that seeing the traditional monogamy as like the assumed, the default, anything else is weird. And you have to like announce it and make yourself othered by doing that, I think is actually something we want to go away.
First of all, I feel like you're doing a little bit of a straw man to this girl and to the perspective of monogamy is the default option. I'm not saying you're weird. I'm not saying what you're doing is wrong. I'm saying it's unconventional, and it is unconventional. That's objective. 95% of people, I looked this up, are not polyamorous. And you're right. I love your point that a lot of people who are monogamous are doing it and probably should be poly. I think that's totally valid. I think that's fantastic. That said, I don't think that gives a poly person a right to not disclose that they're in an unconventional type of relationship or that that's what they're seeking. And you're telling me that they bear equal weight. I say, no, sir. 95% of people are like this girl and that's what they're seeking. And I'll even give you that another 5%. I'll even give you another 10% of people should be poly and just don't know that they need that kind of lifestyle. But that still doesn't mean that they bear equal weight. One is wildly unconventional, just like using meth once a month.
But there are also like lots of different ways to be poly, right? And I think that there's like, or non-monogamous, which I prefer to, I like to say that way. Like, I disagree in saying that just because that they, non-monogamous people are a minority in the population, that they have more obligation than the monogamous people to announce and communicate what they're looking for.
What's the harm? What's wrong if you're a poly person and you know that it's uncommon? Let's lose unconventional. It's
Right.
uncommon.
Yes.
Why can't you just be forthcoming about your expectations? You're the one who has different expectations than an average person.
Well, a lot of times, particularly when you're like just starting to see someone, there is like a casual period where you're not like talking about the future. A lot of people, when they first start, you just go on dates with people. You're
Yes.
feeling each other out.
Yes.
And you're not going like, so where is this heading?
Sure.
When that
Well, hookup
conversation,
culture exists.
when that conversation happens, that's the time to talk about whether you're looking for a monogamous or a polyamorous thing. But in the just by nature of like hitting on somebody at a bar, if you're hitting it off with somebody at a bar, or if you're going on a date with somebody, forcing people to then be like, okay, everybody needs to disclose exactly what kind of relationship they are looking for with everyone they go on a date with or meet at a bar or that sort of thing. Now, in this situation, it does seem like it should have come up because they've been on a few dates. They went on a few dates
Right.
already. Now, the responsibility is shared. I think if she's like, okay, if she really wants to know that this is going to a long-term monogamous commitment, or if he really needs to know that this is like, they're going to establish a partnership, they're going to be like,
Yes.
then yeah, one of them, whoever cares about that more or is more invested in this relationship, needs to bring that up and start that conversation. But I don't see why it's more his responsibility than hers.
Because he's in the extreme minority. That's why. It's just about disclosing the information. I don't think that's a tall bar.
I think we want this relationship model to be normalized. I think it needs to be accepted to the point.
I can do that. I can give you that. I want it to be normalized. I don't think the way to normalize something is to hide it. I think the way to normalize it is to be forthcoming. And if she's not open to that, she goes, hey, I'm not into that. In fact, I would argue that this was toxic for the polyamorous community because now this girl goes, you know what I think about polyamorous people is that they're players.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that it's hidden. You say it's hidden, but it's no more hidden than her objective. Neither of them brought it
Max,
up.
that's the default, though. It's not hidden at all. That's obvious, and that's normal. That's the most conventional thing.
So people should just assume that everyone that they're if they like the most normal thing, the most normal thing, they should just assume that's what the other person wants.
If you go on a date with someone, I think it is a fair and reasonable assumption that a future monogamous relationship is on the table.
What does that relationship look like? Because there's a lot of different ways to do monogamy too.
Well,
There's
what I mean.
There are people who are like, they want to do monogamy where it's like, we are going to move in together in 6 months. There's people who want to do it where
you're dialing into the specifics.
We're heading to marriage, but where it's like, how much are you obligated to disclose
not that
about?
much. You're saying a future monogamous relationship, and that can look a variety of ways. But yes, I would argue that I don't think there's anything controversial about saying that the conventional relationship is an expectation from most people. That's why it's conventional. It's the convention. That's different from saying that that's the only way to be, but it is de facto the way things are. So I think if you're going to live in this world and you want to advocate for your lifestyle, which I'm for, I don't think the way to do that is by being subtle about it and acting like it's not the default assumption. You're trying to act like she's in the same place as him. And I think that's not fair to her.
I think there's a lot of hypocrisy there where you see people though, especially in that casually starting out, like dating period, like people who are quote unquote monogamous will be seeing multiple people at a time.
Yes, but there is in that world a potential for a future monogamous relationship. isn't there? With a polyamorous person, that is not an option.
I think a lot of people who enter monogamous relationships are making compromises, and a lot of people who enter polyamorous relationships are making compromises. Just because someone prefers to be polyamorous doesn't mean they couldn't be convinced to be monogamous by the right person. Just like the same kind of person who's flexible in their monogamy couldn't be convinced to like, there's ways to like meet in the middle too. It doesn't have to be.
But then what are you saying when you say you're polyamorous then?
I traditionally don't like to date in the a strictly monogamous traditional way.
But I feel like you're splitting hairs here. This is going to be a deal breaker for you. It's going to be a deal breaker for most people who identify as poly to be told, look, I want a strictly monogamous, conventional, traditional relationship.
100%.
So then why not be forthcoming about it? I don't see how that's othering. Like I said, I maintain that this is bad. What's bad is hiding it and trying to act like it's already conventional.
Should be conventional.
Yes, I can give you that.
Yes.
I agree with that too.
So how do we make it conventional?
By being open and honest about what it is and who it's for, because it's not for everybody.
No, it's not. That's for sure. But I think in this situation, I started out saying, I think it's very likely that this guy is just a dick. You know, like I do think at the beginning of this, there is something to be said for they both came into it.
Yes.
And were casually dating each other.
Sure.
No one had brought up any sort of relationship. There's no indication that this is heading toward any kind of relationship. They've gone on a few dates.
The assumption with dating is that you're dating someone that could lead to a future potential monogamous relationship. That is the default assumption.
That is some people's default assumption.
The vast majority of people. Unless it's hooking up. If it's hooking up, it's hooking up.
They've been on a few dates. I don't think until you actually have a conversation about like, so is this heading toward a relationship? Is it fair or healthy to assume that this is heading toward whatever kind of relationship, whether it's poly or monogamous that you're interested in? I think if you've gone on a few dates with somebody, if you want to have that conversation, it is your prerogative to start that conversation. Okay. And regardless of which side which person you are there, you've gone on a few dates with somebody, however many, for some people it's one date, for some people it's 2 dates, for some people they need to see someone for a couple months before they're like, okay, let's talk about where this is going. And I think though that should be left to those people to decide like, okay, whenever that person decides, okay, I am interested in pursuing like a next level relationship with this person, taking it out of the just casually dating scene, that's when you have that conversation about what are you really looking for? And two monogamous people can have that conversation and learn that they're not looking for the same thing. Two monogamous people can have that, okay, they can date for a few months. They're just kind of screwing around. They haven't had that conversation. They sit down and they have that conversation. One says, look, I'm looking to get married in the next couple of years and have some kids. And the other one's like, yeah, that's not what I'm looking for. This isn't going to work. That person is not an asshole for not disclosing the nature of monogamy that they wanted.
Where you're putting me now is how much do we have to disclose? How much, how fast? You're right. Do you have to immediately come out with saying that I want kids on your first date?
I don't think so. No, I think
I think the problem though is we're again going to come back to the numbers here. Okay. Most people want kids. Most people want a traditional, conventional relationship. Those aren't crazy assumptions. No, I don't think that you need to say I'm child free on date one. However, that is a much later stage assumption than I'm poly, because that's going to be a factor immediately. That now means that an exclusive monogamous relationship is off the table. That is a very early thing. That is basically the first step of a relationship, is that it would be monogamous for most people. That would be the first step of a monogamous relationship, whereas having kids is literally years down the road.
Yeah, and a lot of people equate monogamy with a relationship. Like that's what a relationship is to them. And I think that is a problem. And I know you keep coming back to like the numbers, but I don't think we need to let tradition dictate how we actually think we should act.
I agree with that though. I feel like we're talking past each other because I'm not speaking from an idealistic perspective. I agree with you. I am pro spreading information. I love what you said earlier. Let's make sure that people know that poly is a thing. And if people are unsatisfied in their monogamous relationship, let's get those people to be poly. I don't think the way to do that, in fact, I think the way that will hurt that cause and hurt that movement is by people not being forthcoming about the fact that they want a relationship that presently is unconventional. Can I get anything from you on that?
And I think if we're going to date healthier and be like as a society and people, like if we're going to date and have sex and love in a healthier, more inclusive way, what we need to do is make a normal in which when you go into a relationship with somebody, you're not assuming all of these things, you're communicating, because the relationship is about what the people in it decide it is, whether it's monogamous or polyamorous, whether it's heading towards marriage and kids or heading towards something else, whether it's
but hiding that you're poly seems like hiding that you're gay.
It's not hiding,
but not being forthcoming. It's a completely different thing than is the normal thing. And you're going to disappoint a lot of people. Do you give me that? A lot of people are going to leave disappointed. If you go on the apps and you start dating people as someone who's poly, again, 95% of people are going to be like, I didn't expect that. This isn't what I wanted. When you get a number like that, are you really going to just sit there and say like, well, the onus is on you to say that you're monogamous and bring it up right away?
The normal that I want to see established in the dating community is that people are going in and they are defining their relationship not by assumptions, but through communication. The fact that most people do a thing that is bad and we shouldn't be doing doesn't make me want to say like we should all keep doing this. I think going into things with this very, a lot of times, inadequate and like self-serving assumption where you're just going like, I'm going to assume that everyone wants to do things my way. Whether even if you're monogamous, even if you're, let's take it back because that's where you seem to understand this. When you take it back to monogamy, there's different ways to do monogamy, right?
Let me give you an example. Suppose that I go on Grindr, a gay hookup app, and I'm a straight man, a little bit gay, but mostly straight guy. I go on Grindr and I start going out with men. And after 3 dates that go well, I say, hey, you know, I'm not really gay. I just want to be friends. I'm not gay. Wouldn't you say that's being disingenuous? Or are you going to say, oh, well, the gay guys are wrong because they assume that you were gay?
I think you're wrong for going to a gay hookup app without being gay. Yes.
Why? They're assuming that I'm gay.
But you have gone to a distinctly, purposefully gay space.
Yes, well, most dating is distinctly and purposefully seeking out a monogamous exclusive relationship.
So if I go on Tinder, or if I go on Bumble, it's not like this is a monogamous app. That's not, this is a whatever you want it to be. Well, it doesn't
market itself as that, but if 95% of people are there, then functionally, isn't it largely a monogamous app? Now, let's not use Tinder because that's more of a hookup app. Let's use Match.com.
I think we're going to get stuck on this because I'm going to circle back and say, again, something I've said before is like, it shouldn't be about assumptions. I know people, the reality is that they are making assumptions. But the reality is the reality.
Again, I feel like I've given you so much. I agree with you that poly should be promoted, that people should know about it, that it should be conventionalized, right? I agree with that. I don't think this is the way. I don't think blaming people for seeking exclusive monogamous relationships, I don't think it's on them to say that. That is the default. That is the conventional.
I'm saying it's on both of these people.
You're saying it's 50-50 and I'm saying no way, Jose. Just like the gay guy on the dating app with me. How is it on him? Like, does he have to say that out loud? Like, I don't think that's fair. There is a reality now. And if you want to fight the reality, I'm all for it. I'll donate to your polyamorous awareness clause so that I agree with you that monogamy is oppressive to many people. But I feel like you won't give me an inch and just admit that, hey, if you're taking the unconventional 5% lifestyle, you should be the one to be forthcoming about it and that's good for the movement. Can I get you anything on that?
I think everyone needs to be forthcoming about what they want, and that needs to be the norm.
I'm happy with that. Okay, going into the situation, we've been debating whether or not poly people have a right to disclose, but this is not actually about that. This is something slightly different.
I think this is a different thing going on.
The question here is it right to interfere, right? Because she jumped in to his thing. He started a new thing with this new girl. Does she have a right to do that, to jump in on his relationship? Lexa Larson Lambiasi says, I feel like YTA because it's not your place to be telling anyone about his love life and status.
She does come off as vindictive and maybe a little aggressive here. I do think she's trying to undermine him getting with other people. That being said, she feels pretty burned by this and I think is motivated by like, hey, I don't want other people to be burned. I think she's motivated by like, I don't want people to be burned the same way I am, but I think she's also motivated by like, fuck you, I want to keep you from getting what you want because I am mad at you. So whether she has a right to do this, I don't know. I would not encourage someone to do this, but if she really feels like she needs to, something about this is rubbing me the wrong way, like about what she's doing here. And I do get that, like...
Well, Mary Margaret sees your point. She says revealing someone's sexual identity before they're ready is pretty effed up, but people disguise manipulation and abuse with the label poly and make excuses for their shitty behavior with that title. I'm genuinely conflicted, and a lot of people are confused about this, Max.
I think that's a really solid answer because that's totally true. And I think based on how the OP is framing this guy, he seems like probably one of those.
And you don't like these people though, right? I'm not getting a lot from you there. You're a sincere polyamorous person. Don't you dislike someone who is essentially masquerading as a polyamorous person? I said, what distinguishes this guy from a run-of-the-mill player? I say nothing. Polyamory is all about consent and understanding. This dude is just playing and using the PCID as a get-out-of-jail-free card.
That's totally possible. Now, on the other hand, we can also look at this as like they went on a few dates and this didn't work out, right? Because they didn't communicate about what they wanted. And then I think he was a real asshole about like, I think that's where he clearly becomes an asshole is when they haven't talked about this at all, you know, which is, I think, an equal sort of thing. Then they're just hanging out and then he starts hitting on a girl next to her, like right in front of her without ever having talked about this or anything.
Yes.
That's up. That's very uncool.
Now we're talking.
Yeah, like that was where I was like, this guy is one of the bad ones.
Chris Griswold says actual poly people stated up front. It's a selling point for the people you should actually be wanting to meet. Bruno, I think I got you in the corner on that.
Well, that's his opinion. Yeah.
Well, it seems like a strong point. It's a selling point. If you're poly, you want to meet poly people so you can be poly together.
Yeah.
Isn't the onus even stronger on the poly person to make it happen? Because look, it was a waste of time for him too.
Yeah.
And you're the unconventional one. You're the 5%. So why not just say it?
There's also the idea that like every sort of physical, flirty, like potentially sexual thing is heading towards some kind of relationship, whether it's poly or monogamous.
Yeah, sure.
And like it's a lot of the times, especially if you're just like, I think apps are one thing, but if you're just like picking somebody up at a bar and you guys are kind of you're reading the conversation, you guys are both just kind of being superficial, you're having a good time,
right,
and maybe you're gonna go hook up and then see where it goes from there.
Sure.
I think forcing people to then like disclose some sort of like relationship thing ahead of that is a bit much. And maybe we don't know what was going on with this girl that he was flirting with. It's totally possible that they were just gonna like...
No, see, I think we can go there. We can be like, oh, well, maybe they were just gonna hook up. And I think that's a valid point because if they were just gonna hook up and it was a one night thing, but I'm gonna give submitter here, I'm gonna give OP the benefit of the doubt and assume that, look, this guy is running a business here. Same bar, same thing. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a player pretending to be polyamorous. Stevie Ray writes, this is not polyamory. This is just trying to get your dick wet. Kendall Field says, YTA for getting in someone else's business uninvited. I had a woman cheat on me, but it's not my place to run up on any dude she was dating and tell him, stay in your lane and mind your own business, people. And this is the one argument that I really do not like. This got me heated. It's none of your business. It's not, someone getting murdered isn't my business. A company committing fraud isn't my business. A homeless person starving on the street, not my biz. Just because something doesn't directly involve you doesn't mean you can't take positive action. That's the whole premise of the media, the police, the FBI, being a neighbor. No one has a right to never be interfered with if they're messing with other people. The Good Samaritan helping the destitute traveler was good precisely because he said, this is my business, despite the surrounding culture insisting it wasn't. I don't buy this none of your business thing.
This can be spun toxically in a lot of ways though too, where people then try to interfere with what they think they're entitled to.
Busy Becky it, meddle and other affairs. I agree.
And people can grow and change and learn too. Like, someone can you over and then they can get better from that. And then you can come back and say like, no, you're like,
of course,
warning people that they are this terrible person when they may have grown.
I'm all about forgiveness. I understand what you're saying. But again, I have to say it looked like a duck. It quacked like a duck. And then it was a duck. Part of being a hero, and when I say hero, I mean someone who takes action that spurs goodness in the world, is taking the risk. You got to be right. If you see an old lady getting mugged and you shoot the mugger in the head and it turns out it was all a sketch, it was just a comedy bit, well, no, you're not the hero. You have to be right. But in this case, she was right. Lindsay Ray says, wow, this one is tough. Everyone sucks here, or YTA. I'm not sure. Mostly leaning toward YTA. First, you frequent the same bars. All right, I can buy that. But to notice he's being touchy with another girl and then following her to the bathroom, that is awkward AF. And I agree with that, Max. I think it is awkward. Sometimes doing the right thing requires some weirdness and awkwardness and creepiness. How else are you supposed to do good in the world unless you meddle in other people's business?
She may be justified in this particular circumstance just because this guy is clearly, I think, being a huge dick, you know,
Absolutely.
but I think we want to make sure we're not encouraging this sort of behavior universally, you know, we're like, that's it. But like, yeah, it could easily go in a very bad direction. But I think in this particular instance, yeah, you may have been justified in doing
There's
that.
There's a time and a place. I'm not saying meddle whenever you think something is wrong. However, I would argue that if this guy did change his behavior and was then being immediately forthcoming about being poly, then it's never going to hurt anyone. She's going to look like an idiot if she goes up to some girl and she goes, you know, he's poly, right? She's going to go, yeah, I know. And then she looks like an idiot. No harm, no foul if she does that. So I don't really see the harm. Cody Milford says, NTA, tired of our culture being so sensitive to the feelings of others. If you see someone being shitty to someone and have an opportunity to stop them from continuing their shittiness, please do it. Isn't stopping shitty things literally what superheroes do?
Yeah, I don't think this person is a superhero. I'm going to say that. I think.
Well,
I think there is something very petty about what they're doing, and I think it is probably possible. I think it worked out, but it easily could have gone wrong. And I would say to this person, like, I think this person in the future, you need to communicate more upfront and better with the people that you're dating.
Let's not get caught up on their initial thing. Do you think it was okay that she intervened in this situation?
It worked out.
It worked out.
I think
she was right.
Yeah. But she couldn't have known that exactly.
Well, she sensed it, Max. She got it. Come on. She heard the duck quacks, baby.
Right. And I think, yes, I think it was the right thing to do, but tread lightly, because this is like, I don't think this is something that, not necessarily going to be a repeat.
No.
You know.
I agree. Let's tread carefully. So on the issue of AITA for telling a guy's new girl that he's polyam, I say not the asshole, meaning that he is the asshole because he was running the exact same thing again. How about you?
I think he's enough of an asshole that it makes her not the asshole, but she easily could have been if he wasn't such an asshole.
So you're going not the asshole.
I'm going not the asshole.
Woo! I did not see that, folks.